The thrilling story begins with an ancient king named Julius, showcasing a sword of immense power. His entire empire was known as the Caesars, who carried forward their legacy. With the help of this sword, the king had won many battles and conquered numerous countries. The situation had reached a point where, due to this sword, he had never been defeated. As time passed, the magical sword continued to be passed down through generations. Many of his family members, who were also kings, desired to possess this sword, for whoever wielded it would become the most powerful ruler in the world. In the present time, a protector named Ambrose was responsible for guarding this sword. He feared that if it fell into the wrong hands, chaos would spread everywhere. To prevent this, he hid the sword in a highly secure location, unknown to anyone. Ambrose's duty was to protect the sword and ensure it reached its rightful owner. Now, the story shifts to the Roman Empire, where a great king was under protection, and many soldiers had been summoned to safeguard him. These soldiers were led by a commander named Aureus. Aureus arrived with his entire army to protect the king. At the place where Aureus was stationed, a small child approached and touched his armor. Aureus immediately caught the child, suspecting him of stealing. He handed the child over to his soldiers and even ordered them to cut off the child's hands. However, after a moment, Aureus decided to release the child because he saw no fear in the child's eyes. It seemed as if the boy was not afraid of death. Soon after, the protector Ambrose arrived and saved the child from Aureus. Ambrose rebuked Aureus, telling him that showing power over a helpless child was a sign of cowardice. He ordered Aureus to take the child and leave forever. However, Aureus was not going anywhere. One of Aureus' companions, named Demet, became furious and attacked Ambrose. But Ambrose had superior fighting skills. He dodged Demet's attacks and knocked him unconscious. Aureus, witnessing Ambrose's incredible combat abilities, was deeply impressed. None of Aureus' soldiers tried to stop Ambrose after witnessing his strength. Ambrose then took the child and left the place. The truth was that the child's name was Romulus, and he was the heir of the Caesar bloodline. According to prophecy, he was destined to wield the powerful sword in the future and rule over the kingdom. Only Ambrose knew the secret, and he kept it hidden to protect Romulus' life. Romulus' father, a king of a small kingdom, was named Rhys. However, Rhys was a cruel and selfish ruler. He only cared about his own pleasures and expanding his power, with no concern for how his people lived or suffered. One day, a soldier named Aud arrived at Rhys' court with a large army. Aud and his soldiers had greatly assisted Rhys in winning battles, making it possible for Rhys to sit on his throne. In return for his support, Aud now demanded a piece of the kingdom's territory to rule as his own. However, Rhys refused. He did not want his kingdom to be divided, fearing it would weaken his hold on power. Aud was enraged by this refusal and left after issuing a warning. Meanwhile, Romulus was shown spending time with his mother. He was deeply troubled because many kings had recently been assassinated. He feared that if people discovered he was the future king, his life would be in danger, and many would try to kill him. His mother reassured him, saying that he was safe and that many people were there to protect him. Soon, Rhys publicly declared Romulus as the new king, as he was the rightful heir to the Caesar lineage. However, Rhys was not entirely happy about this. Still, he followed the traditions and officially announced Romulus as the future ruler. The most shocking event was that Ambrose, who had always been Romulus' protector, was removed from his position. This decision was made by Aureus, whom Rhys had appointed in Ambrose's place. Ambrose was heartbroken by this, as he had dedicated years to his duty. However, he had no choice but to accept the decision, as it was an order from the ruler. Aureus, who was now the leader of the army, recognized Romulus when he came before him with his father. He realized that Romulus was the same child who had once tried to touch his sword, and whom he had nearly punished by cutting off his hands. At that time, Aureus had no idea that the boy was the king's son. Romulus once again asked for Aureus' sword, took a look at it, and then returned it. Through this action, he wanted to show that he had never intended to steal it, he had only wanted to see it. Rhys also started to understand everything that had happened. Now that Aureus had replaced Ambrose as the protector, Ambrose had no place left in the empire and was forced to leave. As Aureus was sending him away, he asked Ambrose about the strange marks on his body. Ambrose simply replied, "Many years ago, a great king gave me these scars. He was incredibly powerful and dominated me in battle, leaving these marks behind." Saying this, Ambrose left, looking heartbroken. It seemed as though a secret plan was unfolding, one that could eventually harm Romulus. Meanwhile, Rhys met with an old ally named Nectar, who had long been his companion and worked alongside him. However, that very night, Aud and his army launched a sudden attack on the empire. His forces were so massive and swift that no one had a chance to fight back. AUD had given strict orders to his soldiers to kill anyone they encountered. Within moments, chaos consumed the kingdom, and countless people perished. Even Rhys and his wife were killed. Romulus, witnessing the massacre, wanted to save his parents but had to prioritize his own survival. In the midst of the chaos, one of AUD's soldiers, named Wolf, captured Romulus. However, instead of killing him, Wolf took him away to an unknown location. With this brutal attack, AUD's forces had completely overthrown Rhys, and AUD was now the new ruler of Rome. A while later, Aureus regained consciousness and saw the devastating aftermath. His soldiers lay dead, and the empire was in ruins. Overcome with grief, he realized he had failed to protect his people. He could only mourn for those who would never return. Meanwhile, in AUD's newly conquered kingdom, Romulus was presented before him as a prisoner. Wolf, who had captured Romulus, suggested killing him and even stepped forward to do so. However, at that very moment, Ambrose arrived. Ambrose tried to reason with AUD, saying, "If you kill this young child, everyone will call you a coward. He is harmless, right now, he poses no threat to you. Even though a prophecy claims that he will one day rule Rome, killing him now is not the right decision." Hearing this, AUD hesitated and began to think deeply about what to do next. AUD sheathed his sword, but Wolf kept insisting that Romulus should be killed, otherwise, he would become a threat in the future. However, as a king, AUD could not take orders from a mere soldier. Enraged by Wolf's persistence, AUD cut off one of his fingers and ordered that Romulus be taken to a prison where he would spend the rest of his life. Thus, at a very young age, Romulus was taken away as a prisoner. Meanwhile, Aureus and some of his surviving allies learned that Prince Romulus was still alive and being transported to prison. Determined to rescue him, Aureus set out with his companions. Since Aureus didn't have a large army, he recruited every skilled warrior he encountered. With the help of Nectar, he began assembling a team of brave soldiers. During their journey, they came across a warrior, but to their surprise, it was a woman. Her fighting techniques were so impressive that everyone was astonished. Her name was Mira, and Aureus decided to include her in the team. Mira already knew which prison Romulus was being taken to, so she guided them toward their destination. Meanwhile, Romulus and Ambrose were seen on a large ship, being transported as captives. AUD's soldiers kept a close watch on them. As they neared the prison, Ambrose warned Romulus that it was a place from which escape was nearly impossible. Wolf, still holding a grudge, repeatedly tried to kill Romulus because AUD had scolded and punished him because of the boy. However, once again, Ambrose intervened, warning Wolf that if he harmed Romulus, the king would cut off his entire hand. Reluctantly, Wolf backed off, but now, instead of Romulus, he turned his cruelty toward Ambrose. Wolf tied Ambrose up and hung him in chains. He kept questioning him about the mysterious symbol on his chest, finding it incredibly intriguing and wanting to learn more about its significance. Meanwhile, from a distance, Aureus and his allies spotted the prison ship. They were close to reaching their destination. Aureus devised a plan. He and his team would first climb aboard the ship, while Mira would stay behind on their boat and wait for them. However, Mira was far too courageous to sit idly by. She refused to wait and instead advanced alongside Aureus and the rest of the soldiers, preparing for an attack. Their main mission was now in motion. When asked, Mira revealed that she possessed exceptional fighting skills, passed down from her ancestors, which would be very useful today. While Ambrose's hands were tied, he noticed a symbol, one that belonged to the ancient sword that had disappeared years ago. Ambrose immediately realized that the sword must be somewhere nearby. So, he signaled Romulus to go near the symbol and search for the sword. Romulus was completely new to such things, so he hesitated but eventually moved toward the symbol. As he advanced, he suddenly fell down into an ancient underground chamber filled with many relics. Finally, he spotted a mannequin holding the very sword he was destined to wield. Since Romulus was the heir of the Caesar lineage, he was able to take the sword in his hands and began to make his way out. He had already decided that the first person he would strike down was Wolf, as he was the one planning to eliminate them all. When Romulus charged at Wolf with the sword, Wolf managed to evade the attack and now started hunting for Romulus himself. Meanwhile, warriors Mira and her allies were climbing up toward the battle. Ambrose had freed himself from his restraints and was now assisting them. Together, they launched an attack on the enemy soldiers. Mira proved to be incredibly brave, single-handedly fighting off multiple soldiers. No one could stand against her. Meanwhile, Aureus rushed inside to rescue Romulus from Wolf, who was attacking like a madman. Aureus then started guiding Romulus and the others through a tunnel to escape. But instead of fleeing, Mira decided to return and assist Aureus in battle. The two of them fought against multiple soldiers, but the enemy numbers kept increasing. Eventually, they found themselves surrounded. With no other option left, they leaped into the water. At that moment, their allies arrived with a boat. Without hesitation, Orus and Mira got onto the boat and sailed away with the others. Wolf and his soldiers could only stand there, watching helplessly. Orus, Mira, and their team successfully delivered Romulus safely to Nectar. Nectar explained that, for Romulus's safety, they had to send him to Constantine. There, he would be completely protected, ensuring that he wouldn't suffer any harm. After some time, Orus discovered that Constantine had already met with Aud, which meant he would summon Romulus only to hand him over to Aud. When Mira learned about this, Nectar's allies turned against them and attacked. Orus and Mira fought with all their might to protect Romulus, swiftly eliminating all the soldiers. In the end, Orus even killed his best friend, Nectar, realizing at that moment that he could trust no one. Now, they had no safe place to keep Romulus. That night, they all camped in the forest, searching the map for a secure location. Eventually, they found that in the southern region, there existed a kingdom that had never been attacked by any army. Holding on to a sliver of hope, they set out the next day toward this small kingdom. Their journey was treacherous, as they had to cross icy mountains, but they managed to reach their destination. The kingdom's commander welcomed them warmly and led them inside, explaining how no invasion had ever occurred there. The people of this kingdom had managed to live in peace, completely hidden from the outside world. However, the commander was unaware of Romulus's true identity. Ambrose had deliberately kept it a secret, fearing that if the commander discovered Romulus was the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, he might refuse them refuge. As Orus listened to the commander, he learned that there was only one true threat, the cruel king named Vatican. The commander explained that they had survived by offering numerous tributes to Vatican in exchange for their safety. Meanwhile, at Vatican's court, Wolf arrived with his soldiers. He, too, had discovered that Orus and his companions had taken shelter in the hidden kingdom. Without hesitation, Wolf informed Vatican about Romulus, revealing that he possessed the legendary sword that would make him the future emperor of Rome. Wolf also mentioned the name Ambrose, the warrior who had been protecting Romulus. At this, Vatican was visibly shocked and immediately asked whether Ambrose bore a specific mark on his body. Wolf confirmed it, revealing that Ambrose had the exact same marking. This shocking revelation uncovered a hidden truth: Ambrose's body bore a mark that Vatican himself had given him long ago. At that time, Ambrose had refused to support Vatican, and as punishment, he was branded. Now, Vatican was determined to capture Ambrose at any cost. He turned to Wolf and made him an offer. Wolf could keep the sword, but he must leave Ambrose behind. This was an irresistible opportunity for Wolf, so he set out with his soldiers to capture them. For the first time, Vatican and Wolf launched an attack on the hidden kingdom. They slaughtered many families and, using a child, sent a message demanding that Ambrose be handed over to them at any cost. If Ambrose does not surrender himself, the people of the kingdom will be executed one by one. When the little girl ran around, delivering this terrifying message, everyone was shocked. Even the commander now realized that Romulus was no ordinary child. He was destined to be the future ruler of Rome and accomplish great things. However, the commander could not risk the lives of his entire kingdom for the sake of one child. Therefore, he asked Romulus and his companions to leave immediately. Orus, however, was unwilling to let the Roman Empire fall into the wrong hands. Determined to fight back, he began preparing for war alongside his soldiers. At the very least, they had to take a chance to reclaim their empire. Reus, though reluctant to force anyone into battle, pleaded with everyone to stand together and protect their kingdom. But the commander refused to take part in the conflict, and many of his soldiers followed his decision. The next day, Orus was joined by numerous warriors who were ready to fight alongside him. Recognizing the responsibility that lay ahead, Romulus entrusted the royal sword to Orus, believing that he was the best leader to guide the army to victory. Orus was deeply honored to receive the sword and took charge of leading the warriors. Reus expressed his gratitude to every soldier who stood with them, declaring that no matter what, they would not let their kingdom fall into enemy hands. Although Orus's army was much smaller, they were fierce and determined warriors. On the other side, Vatican's massive army advanced relentlessly. His forces included terrifying creatures that could devour humans after killing them. Vatican wasted no time and commanded his soldiers to charge ahead and annihilate their enemies. As Vatican's army crossed into their territory, Reus signaled his soldiers to launch a counterattack. Arrows rained down from the fortress walls, and fireballs were launched at the invaders. Initially, Vatican's forces suffered heavy losses, but their sheer numbers allowed them to breach the fortress with ease. The battle erupted in full force. Warriors from both sides clashed, fighting desperately to reclaim their empire. Each of Reus's soldiers faced 5 enemy warriors at once, displaying immense courage and determination. However, as the battle raged on, it became evident that Vatican's overwhelming forces were gaining the upper hand. Reus refused to let his people die in defeat. With unwavering resolve, he fought with all his might, continuously motivating his soldiers to stand their ground. Just when all hope seemed lost, the last surviving battalion of Rome's former king arrived to aid the warriors. Their arrival boosted everyone's morale, and they resumed their fierce fight against Vatican soldiers. Meanwhile, Vatican and Ambrose were locked in an intense duel. Once allies, they now sought to destroy each other at any cost. Ambrose, however, proved to be the stronger of the two. He ultimately killed Vatican and burned his body to ashes. To confirm Vatican's death, Ambrose brought back his mask and showed it to everyone. Seeing this, Vatican soldiers panicked and fled the battlefield. Without a leader, they saw no reason to continue the fight. The Roman forces, now reinvigorated, began overpowering the remaining enemies. However, the greatest threat still remained: Wolf. He was relentlessly chasing Romulus, determined to kill him. If even a moment was lost, Wolf would have succeeded in his mission. Just as Wolf was about to strike, Orus intervened and engaged him in battle. Orus fought bravely, refusing to let Wolf harm Romulus. But Wolf proved to be a formidable opponent, inflicting serious injuries on Orus. As Wolf prepared to strike Romulus again, the young heir picked up the royal sword and, with a swift and powerful blow, ended Wolf's life. With the greatest threats eliminated, Romulus and his people had finally secured their kingdom. But he knew that as long as the royal sword existed, others might come after it, bringing destruction upon innocent lives. Understanding this, Orus took the sword and cast it far away, where it struck a stone and remained embedded there. As time passed, no one was ever able to pull the sword from the stone. It was said that only a true heir of the Caesar lineage, possessing the same divine strength, could retrieve it. Many tried, but none succeeded. Years went by, and Ambrose was now seen with a young boy, Romulus's son. Ambrose had passed down the stories of the great battle to the child, ensuring that he knew of his father's legacy. Through this, it was revealed that after the Great War, Romulus had become the emperor of Rome. He ruled wisely and justly, leading his people into a new era of prosperity. Even now, Rome continued to thrive under his leadership, proving that the prophecy had been true all along. Now, Romulus's son knew everything about his father. Perhaps one day, he too would follow in his footsteps and rule Rome just as nobly. And with that, our story comes to an end.